If my bank account hit zero today, I wouldn't look for money first. I'd look for something far more valuable. Because without it, almost every financial decision I'd make afterward would probably make my situation worse. Let me explain. Most people think the worst part about losing all your money is the money itself. I don't think that's true anymore. The worst part is watching your mind slowly begin to turn against you. At first, it doesn't even feel like panic. It feels like urgency. Your thoughts begin racing ahead of reality. How will I pay rent? What if this never gets better? What will people think if they find out? Within minutes, your brain starts writing stories that haven't happened yet. You haven't missed a payment. You haven't lost your home. You haven't failed. But your mind acts as though every possible disaster has already arrived. What most people never realize is that financial fear isn't logical. It's biological. Long before money existed, uncertainty meant danger. Our brains evolved to react quickly whenever survival felt threatened. Today, the danger may be an empty bank account instead of a wild animal. But your nervous system doesn't always know the difference. Your heart races. Your breathing becomes shallow. You stop thinking about solutions and start searching for escape. That's why intelligent people often make their worst financial decisions when they're under the most pressure. Not because they suddenly become careless, but because fear quietly convinces them that acting fast is the same as acting wisely. Over time, I've realized something uncomfortable. Many of us don't actually fear having no money. We fear what having no money says about who we are. In a world where success is constantly displayed through vacations, new cars, promotions, expensive dinners, and perfectly edited social media posts, an empty bank account can begin to feel like an empty identity. Slowly, your self-worth becomes attached to a number. Without noticing it, your confidence begins rising and falling with your balance, and that's a dangerous place to live. Because if your identity depends on your money, every financial setback becomes a personal failure. That's why, if my bank account ever hit zero, my first step wouldn't be chasing income. It would be protecting my mind, because money can be rebuilt. But if fear takes control of your thinking, you'll spend far longer recovering from your decisions than you ever will from your empty account. And before we talk about rebuilding your finances, we first have to stop panic from becoming your financial advisor. If the first step is protecting your mind, the second is protecting your reality. Because once the panic begins to settle, something interesting happens. You finally see the difference between what is happening and what you're afraid might happen. Those are rarely the same thing. When money disappears, the brain has a habit of turning one problem into 20. An empty account suddenly becomes unemployment. Unemployment becomes homelessness. Homelessness becomes failure. Failure becomes the belief that your life has somehow fallen permanently behind everyone else's. But the strange part is, none of those things have happened yet. They're simply stories your frightened mind is trying to prepare you for. And while you're busy fighting imagined disasters, you stop paying attention to the real problem standing quietly in front of you. This is where I'd make my second move. I would stop trying to save my entire future and focus only on protecting the next 7 days, not next year, not retirement, not becoming wealthy again, just the next week. Fear loves enormous questions. How will I recover from this? What if I never catch up? What if I lose everything? But calm begins with much smaller questions. What do I actually need today? Which expense truly cannot wait? Who do I need to speak with before making assumptions? Without noticing it, your attention shifts from imaginary catastrophes to practical decisions. And that's where your confidence quietly begins to return. I've noticed that financially resilient people don't always have more money than everyone else. They simply know how to separate urgency from importance. They understand that survival isn't about solving every problem overnight. It's about creating enough stability to think clearly again. Because clarity is incredibly difficult to find when your mind is trying to solve problems that don't exist yet. So before I searched for another investment, before I worried about rebuilding my savings, before I compared my situation to people whose lives I only know through carefully edited photos, I'd protect the essentials: food, shelter, communication, my health. Everything else could wait. Because rebuilding your finances doesn't begin when more money arrives. It begins the moment you stop allowing fear to decide which problems deserve your attention. And that's when the third step becomes possible. Once your mind is calm and your essentials are protected, the third step isn't looking for the perfect opportunity. It's rebuilding your ability to earn. That may sound obvious, but it's surprising how many people begin chasing quick money before they rebuild their confidence. Because the strange part about financial loss isn't that it empties your wallet. It's that it quietly convinces you you've lost your value. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has skills. You start seeing yourself as someone with problems. Those are two very different identities. Over time, I've realized that money is rarely the first thing people lose. They lose belief in themselves. And once that happens, almost every decision becomes smaller. You apply for jobs beneath your abilities because rejection suddenly feels unbearable. You avoid reaching out to people because you're embarrassed by your situation. You stop learning. You stop creating. You stop believing anyone would pay for what you know. Without noticing it, you begin protecting yourself from disappointment instead of moving toward opportunity. That's why, if my account ever reached zero, I wouldn't spend the entire day staring at the balance. I'd spend it asking a different question. What can I do today that another human being would happily pay me for? Not next month, today. Maybe it's a skill you've ignored because it came naturally to you. Maybe it's experience you've been undervaluing for years. Maybe it's helping one person solve one problem. Because income doesn't always return through one dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it returns through one small opportunity that restores your confidence. Then another. Then another. What most people never realize is that confidence grows the same way wealth does. Slowly. One decision at a time. One promise kept to yourself at a time. Every small action sends your brain a powerful message. I'm not powerless. And that's the message fear desperately tries to silence. Money can disappear overnight. Skills rarely do. Experience doesn't. Your ability to learn doesn't. Your character doesn't. Those are assets no bank balance can measure. Because when you stop defining yourself by what you currently have, you begin rebuilding from something much stronger than money. You begin rebuilding from who you've become. And that's exactly where the fourth step begins. The fourth step might be the most uncomfortable of all. I would stop trying to look successful. Because when money disappears, something else quietly takes over. Pride. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that whispers, don't let anyone know you're struggling. Keep pretending everything is fine. People will think you failed. So instead of adjusting our lives, we protect our image. We keep subscriptions we no longer need. We keep dining out because we don't want friends asking questions. We continue buying clothes, gadgets, and little luxuries. Not because we can afford them, but because we're afraid of what people might assume if we stop. The strange part is, most people are far too busy worrying about their own lives to study yours. Yet we spend an incredible amount of money trying to maintain a version of ourselves that exists mostly inside our own heads. Social media only makes this harder. Every scroll becomes another reminder that someone is buying a house. Someone is celebrating a promotion. Someone is boarding another flight. And somehow, everyone seems to be moving forward except you. But social media has never been a balance sheet. It's a highlight reel. It rarely shows the loans, the sleepless nights, the credit card statements, or the quiet anxiety hiding behind the perfect smile. Over time, I've realized that pretending to be financially okay is one of the most expensive habits a person can have, because every dollar spent protecting your image is a dollar that could have protected your future. If my account ever reached zero, I'd give myself permission to become invisible for a while. I'd say no to invitations I couldn't comfortably afford. I'd stop buying things just to avoid uncomfortable conversations. I'd let go of the exhausting need to appear as though everything was under control. Because real confidence doesn't come from convincing other people you're doing well. It comes from knowing you're making decisions that your future self will thank you for. Without noticing it, something remarkable begins to happen. The pressure to impress slowly disappears. And in the space where that pressure used to live, discipline quietly takes its place. Because the moment you stop spending money to protect your reputation, you finally give yourself permission to rebuild your life. And that's when the fifth and most important step begins. The fifth step would have nothing to do with my bank account. It would have everything to do with my perspective. Because after the fear settles, after the essentials are protected, after I've started earning again, and after I've stopped living for other people's approval, I'd remind myself of one truth that's surprisingly easy to forget. Money is a tool, not an identity, not a personality, not proof that you're winning at life. Some of the most financially stable people you'll ever meet don't feel rich because they have the biggest salaries. They feel rich because they no longer believe their peace depends on the next paycheck. What most people never realize is that true financial freedom doesn't begin when you reach a certain number. It begins the moment your emotions stop rising and falling with your bank balance. That's a different kind of wealth, the kind no recession can completely take away. Over time, I've noticed that every financial setback leaves you with two choices. You can spend the next few years asking, why did this happen to me? Or you can begin asking, what is this experience trying to teach me that comfort never could? One question keeps you trapped in the past. The other slowly builds a wiser future. Because sometimes losing money teaches lessons that making money never will. It teaches humility, patience, gratitude, resourcefulness. It forces you to separate what truly matters from what simply looked impressive. Without noticing it, you stop chasing the appearance of success and start building a life that's actually difficult to shake. If my bank account hit zero tomorrow, I wouldn't pretend it wouldn't hurt. It would. I'd probably feel afraid. I'd probably question myself. I'd probably have moments where the future looked uncertain. But I also know this. An empty bank account doesn't erase my experience. It doesn't erase my skills. It doesn't erase my character. And it certainly doesn't erase my ability to begin again. Because going broke is an event. It is not an identity. The balance in your account may change overnight, but the person capable of rebuilding it is still looking back at you in the mirror. And sometimes that's the only investment you need before everything else begins to grow again.